Let's be honest, right? Fights in One Piece nowadays aren't like how they used to be. That being said, here's a good reason for that. Hey guys, and welcome back to the One Piece Club, where we don't just we don't get up and follow the hype, but we also make sure to analyze and understand the status quo of the story. If you like this video by the end, right, please subscribe to the channel, because you know what? That gives me the motivation to actually make more videos and even get better in content creation, okay? So, when it comes to fights in One Piece, we must talk about the power system involved. The real turning point, in my opinion, was this. Like, I feel like this statement was Oda's own way of saying, hey, I gotta tell you guys, expect fights to be more about Haki than devil fruits in the future. And we all know the famous controversies that Haki brought when it was first introduced around the Marineford arc. But let's skip to that. What makes Haki much better for the progress of the story is its simplicity. You see, the more you progress the story, you'd have to introduce stronger characters. And I know this is known as the problem of power creep. So in this video, I want to do two things. First, I want to explain to you guys why power creep had to happen and why some characters can no longer be useful in battle. I want to prove that there was no way around for Oda, so this had to actually happen. Second, I want to show you guys that you can still actually have amazing fights like this in the past, and that One Piece's power system can still give us those nerve-wracking battles. So basically, accept the reality and stay optimistic. So one might say, what is wrong with the recent fights in One Piece? Like, are you dumb? Well, look, I enjoy them, okay? I actually enjoy them, but not as much as I enjoyed Luffy versus Doflamingo, or Luffy versus Crocodile, or the Straw Hats versus Oars. See, the elements that I miss is the creativity. This element was found in almost every fight because each devil fruit was unique and the user had to find creative ways to win. Zoro's fights were simple because it's swordsmanship, but they were intense because he always fought opponents stronger than him and won. Haki fights are amazing, but they make fights like Dragon Ball. And I love Dragon Ball fights because that's the thing. It's only for Dragon Ball. You know what I mean? The change in the fights in One Piece didn't just have an impact on the story. It also had its impact on the decent fights. See, Advanced Conqueror's Haki is basically the standard these days, right? We have to be honest. I'm not saying that devil fruits don't exist and we just see Roger and Shanks clones fighting. I'm saying that devil fruits are used only as power boosts. See, take example, the Hobi Hobi no Mi, or the Hobby Hobby no Mi. Remember the good old days when we used to say, she's one of the characters who can theoretically beat Kaido? It turns out that that had been totally impossible. The Heart Pirates didn't just prove that Haki could counter these special effects of devil fruits, but it also made them completely useless. In other words, these physically weak characters who have broken or unique devil fruits are no longer relevant. It's all about clashes and raw power now. To be honest, this is a matter of preference, right? Like I said, I love taijutsu and hand-to-hand combats that break entire mountains, but we need a balance here. Creativity and unique abilities are what actually prevents the problem of power creep. So this means that a strong character can still be beaten by a weak or a much weaker character because of their abilities, and it's under certain conditions. This is what makes power scaling impossible and what makes battles unpredictable. And I love this much more. Okay, so why did this happen all of a sudden? I want to call the Whole Cake Island or the Whole Cake Island arc as the pile of creativity. Oda had put so much creativity in this arc to make sure that the most beautiful devil fruits in the series could exist. We all know that the Paramecia devil fruits are the most irregular and the most diverse. We saw so much creativity with devil fruits like the Mochi Mochi no Mi, the Mira Mira no Mi, the Book Book no Mi, and the Mimo Mimo no Mi. I'm not saying that Oda has run out of ideas, but making strong characters for the final saga while maintaining the same level of creativity is nearly impossible. The story will get too complicated, and you should remember that One Piece is mainly intended for middle school readers and high school kids. The audience prefer action. Hunter x Hunter is a great example of that story that went the other way. We pushed Oda to create a monster because of all the hype since Punk Hazard. Kaido is that monster. Don't forget that for the majority of the post-time skip arcs, beating Kaido was the main goal. So that buildup of hype and creativity pile known as Whole Cake Island left no choice for Oda but to make him invincible. But you know, Kaido is not the final villain of the story. The story needs to continue after him, and he still needs to be defeated. This is how fiction works, as you know. So once the ceiling of power and might was broken by Luffy's crazy awakening, Oda had no choice to keep introducing stronger and stronger characters. Otherwise, the stakes would not have been high, and we would have always had to look back on Kaido and say, oh yeah, you know what? Kaido was that strongest, and that was the peak One Piece. That does not make sense. The protagonists need to have an ascending level of difficulty as they progress in the story. Oda can still come up with hundreds and hundreds of new ideas for trivial and unique devil fruits, but most of them will not satisfy the power creep condition. They have to be powers that make us and the protagonists feel despair like a tall wall that is impenetrable. Like, guys, y'all remember the time when Luffy fought Katakuri? I remember that? If y'all remember that, put a 1 in the comments. We need that kind of feeling in every arc, which is, as you may imagine, very difficult for authors. This is why he resorts to mythical zoans. He needs to spend a good chunk of time reading Japanese myths, religious myths, Norse myths, and stuff like that, so that way he can have a big stockpile of devil fruits and several ideas and have them guaranteed to be strong. Why? Why all of that? Because these myths are about very strong creatures with insane powers. The simplification of fights by making advanced Conqueror's Haki the solution for all problems is necessary, in my opinion, but only because Oda has chosen to accelerate things. Wano took too damn long to finish, so Oda had to speed things up. And if you're gonna draw complex fights that have unique ending conditions, you finish One Piece, to be honest, by 2100, chapter 2100. Now, by ending conditions, I mean for each side's victories, which depends on their unique power. No, so fights basically became whoever cuts or punches harder wins. So like I said, let's face the reality. Although I still feel nostalgic about the past, at one point, fights weren't just simplified, they were made into one-panel clashes. This was honestly frustrating, especially during the God Valley flashback. If this flashback had taken place after Egghead but before elbaph, it would have honestly, in my opinion, been better. Nothing is gonna ruin the story if Loki and Harold were introduced a few chapters or a few dozen chapters earlier. But it's Oda's choice, I guess, right? And we now gotta live with it. But now, here's the crux of the power creep problem. Characters who can't use advanced Conqueror's Haki are doomed. They don't have a chance or stand a chance to play big roles in the battle of this final saga. The situation is much worse for characters that can use Haki at all. Yes, I'm talking about you, Usopp, Brook, Nami, Chopper, Frankie, and Nico Robin. Well, I guess Frankie doesn't need Haki. But anyway, this makes the group of characters that can give us amazing and entertaining fights a very small group. And this is why a devil fruit-based power system is self-sustaining. See, no matter how strong a new villain is, there's always a way to beat him or her. It shouldn't be easy, and some characters may die. Each one has their role to play. And one more thing about advanced Conqueror's Haki. See, I think that Oda tried at first to save this useless power system known as Conqueror's Haki and make use of it. It's useless in terms of writing because it works only with weak characters to aura farm. He basically chose to combine it with Armament Haki. But by doing this, he created the strongest ability. See, Roger conquered the Grand Line with just advanced Conqueror's Haki. Even if he had Future Sight, which is an amazing ability, you cannot beat someone like Kaido or Whitebeard with that. Their whole body flows with advanced Conqueror's Haki, so you will not do any damage to them. Now, as for Mythical Zoans, their whole point is to be rare, so he can't just bring out 20 random characters each arc with Mythical Zoan powers just to address this power creep situation. And that applies to old characters as well. Chopper now has the chance to become a Mythical Zoan user and rise or raise his level to the class of Luffy and the others in terms of relevance. Some fans are already complaining that Oda has introduced too many Zoans in the first place. So this is a big issue. And I think the possibility of creating a fourth category of devil fruits was still there. Or Or just making Logia users relevant again would be another option. Remember Logia users? Like, yo, yes. With armament Haki, I'm not talking about admirals. Those guys can beat the shit out of you, even if you have Haki. So Oda has been somehow killing and destroying his own power system little by little. The Haki power system is one that is most prone to power creep. See, at first, right, you might think that this way of power scaling becomes easier. No, it does not. See, between the characters that can use advanced Conqueror's Haki and have overpowered Mythical Zoans and those who don't have them, there's a huge gap. And these short one-panel clashes, it has become very, very difficult to tell which character is stronger than the other. Not to mention that the only concrete measure of how strong a character is the damage that they do to islands and the environment. In other words, because these characters are all overpowered and it's just about raw Haki power, it's hard to tell which characters is stronger unless we get a fight. The same thing applies to Devil Fruit users, of course. But like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm still, to be honest, in my opinion, optimistic. I don't think that it's over for the One Piece power system and its fights, and I'm mainly optimistic because of Imu. What intrigues me about him the most is his abilities. They are so complex and so powerful that they make up the entire time when Oda relied on Haki. But don't get me wrong, power creep problem will remain. It's just that the final battle won't be simply who has the strongest Haki that wins. Imu's ability, which comes from the Devil's Fruit, works on a system of risk and a reward. So this will push the protagonists to struggle and think of ways to counter his power, which automatically makes the fights better. The only thing I'm afraid of is Luffy. To be honest, it will eventually become a 1v1 between him and Imu. But before this, I want to see others either fighting Imu or his Holy Knights and Domi Reversi Pawn. Oda has always introduced the Holy Knights who purely rely on their devil fruits and regeneration powers. The problem is that they're stupid. Just a bunch of morons except Gunko. And that's a shame, to be honest, because I just wish that the remaining Holy Knights are different. There's also the problem of Luffy's growth potential. Since he fought Kaido, let's be honest, since Luffy fought Kaido, he has not gotten any necessary time to reflect on his powers and his abilities. And you know that when it comes to battle, Luffy is really a genius. No, so I want to see the Luffy we saw against Katakuri making full use of his imagination. Whoa, what was that? So I want to see the Luffy we saw fighting against Katakuri making full use of his imagination to make the impossible. Enough of the Gomu Gomu no Mi, okay, Oda? Enough of the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And let's not forget that. And let's not forget about the last pile of Devil Fruit creativity known as the Blackbeard Pirates. By the time they join the final war, not as allies, of course, I want to see them all as awakened users. Garp and a few Marines did some pretty bad damage to them. So if they wish to fight someone like Loki, then good luck. I really have high hopes on them because they're smart, they rely on devil fruits, and I know that Haki will just counter everything. But let's hope that Oda does something like the Big Mom versus Kid and Law battle. See, with Haki, Big Mom could have easily crushed the two. But for the sake of entertainment, Oda chose not to do that. So just as I hope you enjoy what remains from One Piece, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I did not beat around the bush. I hope my thoughts were clear and concise. If that's true, then please subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.